Welcome to Dark Speak, where secrets never sleep, and the darkness always has something to say. Huyet and Sun Lamb, the child of the beast, in the wild mountainous region called Tam Huyet. Old legends still creep through dinner, around a red fire and thin smoke. The old people often tell the story in a deep voice, their eyes avoiding looking into the deep forest as if afraid of something hearing. That story began on a stormy night at the end of the last century, when fate placed a small creature on the border between life and death. And the one who kept that fragile breath was not human. In 1999, in Maltwee village, the birth of a child out of wedlock was like an indelible stain. That night, the sky was covered with dark clouds. The wind blew fiercely to the dirt road leading into the forest. A man silently held in his arms a newborn baby, wrapped in a crumpled old cloth, its skin not yet pink. His face was as cold as stone. His steps hurried, as if he wanted to shake off the heavy debt of blood. When he reached the moss-covered stone slab at the edge of Tam Huyet, he stopped. Placing the child on the cold stone floor, he did not say a word, only bowed his head very low, his hands trembling but his eyes emotionless. Then he turned away, his muddy shoes sinking deep, leaving behind a weak breath mixed with the cold air seeping into every strand of hair. The weak cry that seemed to be about to die was swallowed by the sound of the wind whistling through the ancient trees. But Tam Huyet Forest was never a silent place. In its heart, darkness had eyes, and life was hidden, waiting to rise. From the white mist, a giant figure separated from the night. It was not an ordinary tiger, but a ferocious beast with golden fur shining like fire burning under crescent moon. Its eyes were glowing, like two red embers smoldering. It did not charge, did not roar. It walked slowly and heavily, its breath smelling of damp earth and iron. The distance was only a few steps. The claws should have torn the fragile figure apart, but instead it lowered its head and licked the child's forehead. The crying stopped immediately. The beast took the cloth in its mouth, lifted the child like a precious object, and disappeared into the thick layer of leaves. The cold, damp cave on the northern slope of the mountain became its new home. This place used to be a den of tigers, but after the iron trap ripped off its shoulder, the yellow tiger lived alone, not daring to come near human footprints. However, that night, the wild instinct gave way to something else, something like an invisible bond. It curled itself around the small body, warming itself with its body heat, listening to the young breathing mixed with the wind. The next morning and many mornings after that, it left the cave to hunt, bringing back fresh meat, tearing it into small pieces and placing it beside the child's lips. Its large, warm tongue licked the cold skin, then lay across the cave entrance like a living wall. The days passed by following the moon cycle. The child learned to roll over, then crawl, under the patient gaze of the beast. It taught with gentle headbutts, forcing the boy to stand up, then watching when he fell, helping only when absolutely necessary. On the high branches, monkeys, owls, and flying squirrels all watched silently, as if witnessing a paradox of the law of survival. Once, when the golden tiger was absent, a long, dark shadow silently slithered in. The giant cobra, its body as black water, its forked tongue hissing coldly, approached the child. In just a moment, a roar shook the cliffs. The beast rushed in from the cave entrance, its eyes flashing with fire. The lightning-like pounce made the intruder convulse. Death fell so quickly that the darkness did not even have time to register. The boy still slept peacefully, unaware that death had just passed by. Every rainy season, the stench of the earth rose in the cave. Every season, the moon waxes and wanes. The boy becomes more a part of the forest than a human. But among the sounds of the mountains and forests, there is still another heartbeat hidden. The beat of a secret that has been sleeping for 2 decades, waiting to be revealed. Survival lessons do not need words. As long as the eyes follow and the heart does not abandon, the weakest can grow up between claws and fangs. The deep blood forest never makes a sound, but it has recorded the existence of a strange mother and child, a golden beast and a human child. Night hunters in the area sometimes say that they hear the laughter of children mixed with deep roars, echoing in the thick fog. Some people claim to have seen the golden tiger standing motionless on the edge of a rocky crevice, its eyes seeming to be waiting for a silhouette. But then they all dismiss it because no one believes that a predator can know something called love. That rainy season, in the damp darkness of the great forest, a life abandoned by humans was reborn under the hands of a species that humans have always feared. No one knows why the golden beast saved the child, nor does anyone understand what made it betray its instincts as the leader of the predatory chain. All we know is that since that fateful night, Tam Huyet has had another legend not recorded in books, only passed down through half-believing, half-fearful glances. The child was named Lamb, not by a human, but by the land itself. Lamb means forest, the first home its eyes saw when it first opened its eyes. It had no family name, no hometown, no papers, only a golden tiger that had carried it from the edge of the forest into a cave, and a vast forest that treated it like flesh and blood. The deep breathing of a ferocious beast, the sound of claws lightly scratching the stone slab, the sound of dry branches breaking under familiar weight. Those were the first sounds Lamb engraved into his memory. He grew up on the warm milk of his mother tiger, instinctively seeking that source of life. The mother tiger did not avoid, did not growl, only gently used her large paws to hold Lamb close to her chest, as if afraid that a cold wind would sweep away the little life. In the early days, Lamb's body was as weak as a dry branch. The mother tiger licked the dirt off his body every morning, warming him all night long with her muscular body. That invisible thread tied the fates of two creatures of different species, making them exist as one. A few weeks later, Lamb learned to crawl on a rock surface, imitating each graceful step. Every morning, when the mother tiger left the cave to hunt, he lay at the cave entrance watching until a large figure disappeared into the deep forest. Then Lamb followed the footprints imprinted on the rotten leaves. The mother tiger did not stop him, only stopping to wait when he fell too far behind. Once, Lamb slipped and fell, his lips bleeding. The yellow tiger turned back, licked the wound clean, then bowed her head low so that he could cling to her neck and stand up. Lamb's food was fresh, warm meat or wild fruits that the mother tiger brought back. Sometimes she gently pushed a ripe red fruit towards him with her nose, then lay still to observe. In those bright yellow eyes, there was a flash of the emotion that humans call happiness. When Lamb learned to run, the tiger taught him to chase through the trails that smelled of rotten mushrooms and moss. By the age of 3, his body was strong, his skin was tanned, his hair was messy, his eyes were alert like a predator. He could smell the scent of wild boar from afar, distinguish the sound of squirrels hopping from the footsteps of foxes, and sense the wind direction to hide himself. The mother tiger gradually retreated, only appearing when danger approached. One day, when Lamb was tracking deer, above his head, a green viper coiled motionless on a low branch, its head down, its eyes locked on the boy. Its tongue stuck out, vibrating like a blade scraping through leaves. In an instant, a golden shadow flashed by. The mother tiger's lightning-fast pounce made the snake's body writhe and then fall silent, leaving a thick fishy smell in the air. From that day on, Lamb understood that, besides the darkness, the wind, and fangs, there was another danger: humans. He would always remember the night of thunder and lightning, when a figure stepped out of the water, holding a spear, the eyes not a lost person, but of a hunter. The mother tiger rushed forward, stood in front of the cave, roared, and made the person retreat and disappear. After that night, the tiger taught Lamb to hide his scent, avoid traces, and be so quiet that even insects could not recognize him. He began to understand the invisible boundary, where humans and the wild cannot coexist for long. The days passed seemingly endlessly, but that morning, the wind carried a strange smell, pungent, burnt, penetrating, and persistent. It was not the smell of animal blood, nor the smell of any predator Lamb had ever known. This smell sent a chill down his spine. In the mother tiger's eyes, the alertness suddenly turned into murderous intent. It growled softly, signaling Lamb to retreat deeper into the cave. From outside the forest, a series of sounds rang out: human footsteps, the sound of metal clashing, muffled whispers. The strange smell gradually became stronger, as if signaling something that would cut off the peaceful days of both the tiger and the human. Kaivan held his breath, pressing his ear close to the damp soil, listening to every vibration like an echo from the ground. Beside him, Man Hong, the tigers who raised him, stood motionless, her ears slightly drooping. That was a clear signal of something bad. The two of them did not need words. Just a glance, a slight tilt of the head, was enough to understand each other. The deep forest was usually quiet, but that afternoon a sudden sound tore through the silence. A cry, small, trembling, fragile as it would disappear with just a gust of wind. Not like the sound of an animal, nor the sound of wind. It had a heart-rending tone exactly like the cry of Kaivan himself when he was young. Man Hong paused, took a few steps, then turned to look at him. His eyes flashed with hesitation and confusion. The cry echoed again, this time intermittently, gradually fading away, as if being strangled by an invisible hand. The golden tiger lowered its body, sniffed deeply, then suddenly rushed towards the sound. Kaivan was startled, wanted to stop it, but was too late. In just a flash, the golden figure had disappeared among the tangled tree trunks. He had never seen Man Hong in such a hurry. He rushed after it, passing through the black rotten roots, crossing the cold dry stream. The forest trees suddenly seemed unfamiliar, the shadows of leaves falling down like giant arms blocking the way. Kaivan's heart pounded, each beat resounding in his ears like a drum urging the army. Then the sound rang out, a dry crack, followed by a roar that tore through the air. But it was not the roar of a victor, but a choked roar of pain. Kaivan rushed through the bushes, the thorns tearing at his flesh, only to encounter a scene that made his blood freeze. Man Hong was writhing in a rusty iron trap, the rusty steel teeth still sharp enough to tear through its armor-like skin. Dark red blood continuously flowed from his hind legs, staining the rotten leaves. The mother tiger did not scream, did not cry for help, only let out a deep groan, her golden eyes burning with pain fixed on Kaivan. For the first time since setting foot in the wild, he let out a hoarse, distorted sound like a desperate cry for help. It was no longer the sound of a beast, but of a human. That roar startled the figures hiding in the forest. 3 hunters stepped out, guns pointed. The oldest gestured with a callous hand, his eyes cold as metal. Get out of the way, he's about to die. Another immediately cocked his gun, his finger tensing on the trigger. But at that moment, from the high trees, a whistling sound rang out. A heavy black object swooped down, hitting the gunman hard in the face. It was a large rock, and the hand that threw it did not belong to a human, but to a black ape. A shocking scream echoed throughout the forest canopy. From the dense foliage, a whole group of black apes jumped down like ghosts, rushing forward like a fierce storm. They threw sticks, rocks, and even dry, hard forest fruits at the hunters. One fell to the ground, blood streaming down his forehead. The other panicked, retreated, and dropped his gun. The apes screamed shrilly, not only to protect their territory, but also to drive away those who dared to offend the forest spirit. Strangely, none of them touched Chi Yun. He knelt down, his trembling hand touching Meng Huang's wound. Hot blood flowed with his hand. The tiger mother's breath was rapid, but her eyes were still heavy with an unspoken emotion. An old ape slid down, grabbed the old hunter, and pulled him away, roaring like an order. Immediately, the whole herd disappeared into the forest as quickly as they had appeared. No one could explain why the apes saved the tiger, let alone why they protected a human child. But Chi Yun knew this was no coincidence. The forest had intervened. The forest had chosen to protect its own. The spirit of Black Forest was not a legend. It existed. It breathed in every breath of wind, and it saw through every wild heartbeat. Chi Yun bent down, removed the iron trap, her small hand stained red with blood. Meng Huang groaned softly, as if wanting to convey something. The two trudged back to the cave, a journey marked by blood and will. Each step was a torture. Kaivan supported the tiger drag, and blood painted a bright red path on the trail. Arriving at the cave, Man Hong collapsed. Kaivan used a forest vine to tie the wound tightly. Then, following the instinct of a beast, bent down to lick the blood clean to prevent infection. Not that he learned it somewhere, but because the forest taught him. 3 days later, the mother tiger opened her eyes. She was not strong enough to stand, but her vision had returned. Kaivan lay close by, her head resting on the warm body that protected him during his childhood. From that day on, No one dared to approach Haklam again. The hunters disappeared without a trace. In the village, no one dared to mention the story of the crazy apes attacking humans. Anyone who opened their mouths to tell the story was ridiculed as a delusional person. But none of those who had gone deep into the forest that day returned. And no one asked why, because they knew that there was a power in this place that went beyond guns and gold. Khyven was no longer the innocent child he once was. After the incident, he understood that humans were more than just shadows on the edge of his memories. They were dangers, threats to everything he called family. But the forest protected him in an unexpected way. With a herd of black gibbons, with cold winds whistling through night, and with deep echoes that made the listener's heart clench. Looking up at the cold night sky, where the black dome was empty without a cloud or a star, Tich Lamb clearly felt the silent presence of ancient spirits, entities that once ruled this dark place. They watched his every step, just as they had once watched Hong On, when that tiger was still just a wild creature that no one believed would understand love. From that moment, the thread of fear in Tich Lamb was broken. It was no longer a toddler learning to survive, but part of the forest, a protected soul that no force could easily reach. The heartbeat of the forest was in sync with its blood. The slightest sound, the faintest scent, or the slightest sway of the leaves could not escape its sensitive ears and sense of smell. But then one day, when Mother Tiger was still recovering from her injuries, Tich Lamb decided to leave the places it set foot on, to seek out a land that had never appeared in its dreams. It had no clear destination. It only felt like its feet were being pulled by an invisible force. The further it walked, the thicker the tree shadows became, but not because of the denseness of the tree trunks, but because of the suffocating feeling as if each step was entering a secret that should not be known. Finally, it stopped in front of a narrow crevice hidden behind the rough trunk of an ancient tree. The entrance was silent, no animal footprints, no living creature smell, only a cold breath, as if it had been imprisoned for centuries. Tich Lamb bent down and crawled in. From the crack in the stone ceiling, a pale light shone down, revealing strange carvings spread across the wall. What appeared made it stand still. On the stone surface appeared the figure of a young woman kneeling before a giant tiger. Behind her, an axe blade slashed down, not cutting into the flesh of a human or a tiger, but hitting a round tablet that was shining like a burning sun. Below were ancient, unreadable characters, but Tich Lamb could still feel the sadness and despair permeating every carving. He reached out to touch the cold stone. Immediately, a stream of icy air like thousands of blades cut along his spine. That night, Tich Lamb dreamed. In the dream, he stood in the middle of a cracked, ashen-gray field, without trees or grass. In front of him was Hong On, but he was not lying down or walking around like usual, but sitting upright, his eyes as sharp as sword blades looking straight through him. The voice echoed in his mind, deep, writhing with regret. I used to be human. Tich Lamb stood still, not moving. The voice continued, slow but heavy like a stone sinking to the bottom of the water. There was a person who had given up everything to save a life that did not belong to him. Hong On approached, not exuding a threat, but like a piece of memory finding its way back. I once lived in a village hidden at the foot of the Noyet Tram cliff. At that time, the forest was still everywhere, and there were more wild animals than people. I was the daughter of a shaman, but I did not continue the practice of sacrifice. Every day I went into the forest, freeing trapped creatures. One day, I saved an injured spirit animal. It was neither a tiger nor a fox. It had a strange shape with eyes almost like a human's. The villagers called it a monster. When they discovered that I had hidden in the forest, they came like a storm, without judgment, without listening. They tied me to a stake in the middle of the field, burned me alive, calling it purification. The fire flared up, licking every inch of my flesh. I did not cry out, did not beg, but when the heat tore through my body, the spirit animal appeared. It did not save me. It just stood in the middle of the blood-red smoke, its eyes as deep as the abyss watching my last breath. When my soul left my body, it let me go straight into its body. From then on, I lived in the skin of an animal, without human voices, without the warmth of anyone's hand, only the roars echoing from the abyss. I became Hong On, the one who carries the curse against the will of heaven, protecting innocent souls from the claws of their own kind. Nan Vu, the child in the dream, took a step back, his heart heavy. Hong On continued, his voice as loud as winter thunder. I have wandered through countless seasons of changing leaves in the forest, carrying abandoned children on my back. But all of them died because of the cold, because of being different, because of illness, or because of fear of me. Only you, the first one who did not cry when I came near. You were not afraid, nor did you hate. You are the one I have been waiting for. Nan Vu wanted to say something, but his throat was choked. The image suddenly changed. The ancient steel appeared, engraved with the image of a woman next to a tiger, along with an oath broken by an axe. Hong On's voice echoed as if from the bottom of the abyss. That oath belongs to me, that I will not harm humans, no matter how they treat me. But when the fire engulfed my body, the oath was broken. I could never return to human form. This soul was trapped in the tiger's body until the end of time, unless someone appeared who was not related by blood, did not owe me any debt, but still chose to love me unconditionally. Then the curse would be broken. Nan Vu felt tears falling down his cheeks. He did not understand why, only knew his heart was aching. He wanted to hug the tiger like when he was a child, but the dream ended when Hong On turned away, disappearing into the darkness. The next morning, Nan Vu woke up. Sweat soaked his palms, his heart pounding. He did not tell Mao Ho anything, not because he was afraid, but because he knew that the tiger had lived for hundreds of years, never letting anyone hear his voice. If Hong On chose to tell Nan Vu this time, it was definitely for a reason greater than any words. From that night on, Lu Fong no longer looked at Hong Duk with the eyes of a child who once believed in purity. He no longer considered the tiger as his adoptive mother, his confidant, or just a giant wild beast. He knew clearly that beneath that layer of burnt yellow fur was a soul that had known love, experienced loss, sacrificed everything, and was struggling to bear a curse that no one dared to believe was real. Dozens of questions rushed into his mind. Why could the axe blade shatter the blood oath? Why did the spirit beast stand still when the person he loved was engulfed in a sea of fire? But then Lu Fong realized that there were questions that existed not to find answers, but to remind him that the wound would never heal. The following nights, the dreams came back. Each dream was like a fragment of a lost memory. The young girl sitting in the middle of the forest, carefully bandaging the wounded creature with eyes as bright as the rising moon. The crazy screams of the villagers demanding blood. The blood-red fire engulfing everything. And Hong Duk, not rushing to save, not running away, just bowing his head, his eyes seeming to contain 1,000 years of suffering. Every time he woke up, Lu Fong sat for a long time next to Hong Duk. He did not say a word, just quietly placed his hand on the giant tiger's shoulder. The tiger did not roar, did not lick, just lay still like a sealed memory, waiting for the day to be released. Lu Fong did not remember clearly what day it was, only remembered a feeling of unease rising before the sun completely set. It did not come from the mountains and forests, but from deep within his body, like steel spikes piercing through every piece of flesh. Hong Duk also recognized it. The leader of the pack of hunting beasts stepped out from the shade of the tree, its figure dark and dense, as if it had absorbed the last remaining light. The sound of its claws scratching the ground echoed with a cold hiss, making the air thick. Its blood-red eyes did not leave Huang Yi, not containing a single trace of fluctuation, as if the person in front of it was a mortal enemy from hundreds of years ago. Huang Yi lowered his body, his muscles tightly coiled, his eyes burning with fierce pride. Blood flowed down from his waist, wetting the weeds, but he did not retreat half a step. Behind him, the pack of wild dogs stood tensely, their eyes flickering like will-o'-the-wisp. They did not charge forward, only waiting or obeying an invisible command. The space became dark, as if the entire forest had been sealed into an ancient battlefield, where only two lives remained, one guarding the land, the other invading. Hao Nan, Lu Feng's companion, was dizzy, blood dripping down his eyes, dyeing his vision red. In an instant, it realized that the leader beast was not just a wild beast. Its eyes contained a sinister intelligence, as if behind those pupils was an evil spirit controlling it. Huang Yi roared softly, the deep roar resounding like a ghost drum guiding the wrong soul. The leader beast curled its lips, bared its white teeth, then suddenly rushed away. The air shattered into a cold wind. The two eyes met, quiet and sharp like a piercing knife. The next moment, the two monsters collided. The shockwave reverberated down to the ground. The roar resounded as if to awaken even the ghosts hidden at the bottom of the forest. Blood splattered, falling into creepy red drops in the air. Hao Nam only had time to see Huang Yi's fangs sink deep into the leader beast's neck, twisting as if to tear apart its opponent's soul. The monster screamed and scratched, but the tiger's fangs still did not let go. The final shake rang out with a chilling, cracking sound. The leader's neck was broken. The giant beast collapsed. Huang Yi also staggered, one leg buckled, breathing heavily. Hao Nen screamed, trying to run back, but before his eyes there was only darkness. In the last moment before losing consciousness, he saw Huang Yi turn his head, not roaring, not hissing, just standing there, majestically like the last wall protecting his life. Then that body collapsed. The remaining monsters fled, none daring to turn back. Lu Feng staggered to his feet. Breathing heavily, he dragged himself step by step towards Huang Yi. The golden fur was now dark with blood. The giant body lay on its side, covering him as if still trying to protect him. He placed his hand on the tiger's cheek. The warmth was still there, but the heart had stopped beating. There was only the smell of blood and a silence as heavy as a stone pressing down. No response, no dream, no call. The only creature that had pulled him from the jaws of death, taught him to blend into the forest like blood and leaves, now lay at the foot of this cold mountain. Lu Feng knelt down. His bare hands began to dig. No stick, no hoe, just handfuls of dirt mixed with blood and tears. His fingers bled, his nails cracked, but he kept digging. When the hole was deep, he gently pulled Hong Duke's body down, laying it down neatly as if in a long sleep. Before filling the soil, he plucked out a bunch of yellow fur, hugging it tightly to his chest, as if hugging a part of his lost soul. For many hours after, Tien still sat motionless beside the grave. The afternoon shadows melted into night. The deep forest was immersed in cold humidity. He did not enter the cave, nor did he return to the familiar rotten tree, but only lay close to the dirt grave, his eyes wide open looking up at the endless sky, where there was not a single star left. Every slight movement in the foliage made his heart ache, but the fear had long since disappeared. The most terrifying thing in his life had been taken away, and from that moment on, Tien chose to stay here, guarding the last sacred thing in the wilderness like a gatekeeper between two worlds. It seemed that the forest had sensed the return of the black-haired monkeys. They no longer made a ruckus or howled, but sat quietly on the high branches, their deep black eyes looking down from a distant underworld. They were there like invisible relatives returning to visit the deceased. An old monkey, its back bent like an ancient tree, slowly slid down, placed a bunch of red wild fruits in front of the grave, then disappeared into the shade of the leaves, leaving a space of silence that made one shiver. There were nights when Tien heard a roar echoing from afar. That sound was not the sound of a normal tiger, but seemed to echo from deep within the earth, from rotting memories, like the oath of a soul that would protect him, even though his body had turned to dust. From then on, Tien began to carve in stone. He was illiterate, only knowing how to carve images with his skinny hands. On a cold, damp stone slab appeared the shadow of a tiger standing in front of a small person, the person holding a stick, his eyes looking towards a dim forest. Tien did not need anyone to understand. He just needed to carve so that the memory would not be swallowed by the darkness. One afternoon, after many days of silence, Tien dreamed. In the dream, Lin Ho appeared again, but this time there was no blood, no wounds. It stood in the middle of a halo of dim light. Its eyes had shed all resentment. Without a word, it bowed its head slowly before him, then turned and walked into the mist. Before disappearing, a golden feather floated down. When he opened his eyes, Tien saw it lying right next to him. He took it, pressed it tightly to his chest. For the first time after long, heavy days, he stood up, carrying only that feather, and did not turn back, stepping out of the dead forest. He did not know where he was going, only knowing that it was time to leave the place where a soul had sacrificed and a heart had rested forever. He walked out of the forest in the thin mist of the early morning, his feet covered in mud, his hair tangled like tree roots, his body naked. On his chest was still pressed a tuft of golden feather, his left hand clenched tightly as if holding a piece of bleeding heart. He did not look at the sky, did not look at the ground, nor had a destination, just walked away from the place where the most important person in his life had fallen. The first person to see Tien was a cowherd boy. He ran away in panic, screaming as if he had just encountered a demon. Not long after, the villagers came, some carrying hoes, others holding sticks. They did not know who he was. They only saw a wild boy, walking hunts like a wild animal, his mouth making strange growls, his eyes not shining with fear. A strong man pointed a stick at his face, shouting, "Who are you?" Tien did not answer, just sniffed. His eyes seemed to be examining the strange smell around. From the end of the crowd, a skinny old woman walked out with a stick. Her deep eyes watched intently. Then she quietly took off the worn scarf and put on his shoulder. Her hoarse voice seemed to echo from the bottom of a well. "Boy, let me take him home." Her name was Tin, living alone at the beginning of Lac Van village. Her husband died early. She had no children, and for many years she relied on wild vegetables and a little rice subsidy. The villagers always kept their distance from her, believing that she had been involved in the unclean affairs of the underworld. Tien followed Mrs. Tin without protest. He walked slowly, his eyes following every broken grass under his feet, his ears straining to listen to the wind whistling through the bamboo cracks, the sound of water dripping from the roof, the sound of buffalo grazing in the distance. In the small, dark, damp house, he did not ask for food. She brought him rice. He sniffed it, then bent down to eat it directly like a wild animal, not using his hands, not knowing about bowls and chopsticks. She brought him water. He just licked each drop that spilled over the edge of the bowl like a wild cat. The first night, he did not lie in bed but curled up in the corner of the house, his forehead pressed against the wall, his back trembling slightly with each breath. Mrs. Tin just sat by the stove, her voice hoarse. "You can stay anywhere, but don't leave here after dark." The next day, the villagers came to watch. Some were curious, some were suspicious. They asked him his name. He just roared and then fell silent. His eyes were still as deep as the night forest. Mrs. Tin said to name him Lamb, because his eyes were as deep as the bottomless shadow of the forest. From that day on, the children in the village were forbidden to come near her thatched house. On the first full moon night, Mrs. Tin saw Lamb walking outside. His bare feet glided across the yard without a sound. His shadow seemed to float in the mist. She followed quietly, not daring to call. Lamb stopped at the edge of the he had swung forest, sat silently, his eyes glued to the dense darkness in the distance. He sat for hours, as if waiting for something to return. But the forest remained silent. From then on, every full moon night, Lamb sat at the edge of the village until dawn before returning. The villagers began to gossip. They said he was a child of the forest, not belonging to the human world, speaking a strange language, walking like a wild animal, his eyes always looking towards an invisible realm. Some people insisted that they saw him crawling on all fours in the garden, sniffing the soil, sticking out his tongue to taste the grass. The children heard the story, and at night they dreamed of a roar that tore through the darkness. A little girl said she dreamed of a red-eyed tiger staring outside her window. Another old woman dreamed of her dead son returning, saying that there was someone in the village who did not belong to this world. From then on, the name of the child of the spirit tiger spread throughout Lac Van, like a curse that had never been solved. But then one day, strange signs began to appear in the forest area by the stream. At first, there were just a few large footprints in the sand, deeper than a tiger's footprint, larger than a bear's. Then there was a roar echoing from afar every dark night, unlike any animal the villagers had ever heard. The wild bird suddenly fell silent. The deer panicked and ran away in another direction, and the pack of dogs in the village kept howling towards Tao's son. One night, when the moon hung behind the gray clouds, Kai's son sat by the fire and heard the sound of the stream as if it was being stirred up. He stood up, walked outside, and saw a thick white mist gradually spreading down from the edge of the forest. In the mist, a giant black figure was moving, without a sound, without the stench of wild animals, only the cold that penetrated to the bones. The next day, rumors spread throughout the village. People said that someone had seen that thing standing still in front of his golden tiger hut, then disappearing as if it had never existed. The deep footprints were still imprinted on the moist soil, and the bottom of the footprints was filled with stream water despite the dry weather for many days. Kai-san said nothing. He just silently prepared his bow, jungle knife, and a bag of medicinal leaves. That night, he did not return. No one in the village dared to look for him, but kept their eyes on the dark forest, where they knew that the moonlight would reveal something that no one wanted to see tonight. 3 days later, when the morning mist still covered the valley, Kai-san returned. His shirt was torn, his left arm was tightly wrapped in a bandage of blood-soaked forest leaves. His eyes were red, as if he had just emerged from a nightmare. He did not tell what happened, only said in a hoarse voice, "The forest will not sleep peacefully anymore." From that day on, every time a night wind blew from Tao-san, people would hear two types of roars coming from deep in the darkness. One familiar, one strange. And among the stories whispered by the fire, Kai-san's name was gradually called with a new title, the Guardian of the Dark Forest. Few people in the village knew that every year on the anniversary of Mrs. Cam's death, the person who had opened his arms to take care of the orphan in the deep forest, Kai-san, quietly disappeared from the village. No one dared to ask him where he was going, because everyone understood that it was a trip to the forbidden area west of Tao-san, where the old forest covered the sky, and there was a cave that had collapsed long ago. He did not bring any incense or flowers, nor did he offer any offerings. In his hand was only a white candle and a bunch of dry leaves. Arriving at the cold ground covered with damp moss, Kai-san knelt down, placed his hands on the ground, and softly whispered his mother's name. Not the mother who gave birth to him, but the woman who raised him, taught him how to stand upright in the storm, how to love and how to endure immeasurable losses. The forest wind still blew, the yellow leaves still fell, the sound of the stream murmured from the distant crevices of the rocks. The only difference was that on that day, there was a very soft sound that reached his ears, like the sound of soft feet stepping on the damp soil. He did not turn his head, but his heart knew clearly that he was no longer alone. From the other side of the stream, a tiger cub appeared. The pale yellow fur shone in the mist. The eyes were still young, but contained something deep and familiar that made him choke. It did not roar, did not bow, just stood there looking at him for a long time, a look that was enough for Kai-san's heart to realize that the old soul had returned, not to guard, but to remind him that he had lived up to his words, not betraying his roots, not forgetting who he was. Kai-san nodded slightly without a word. When he blinked, that figure disappeared into mist as if it had never existed, leaving no footprints or sounds other than the steady sound of flowing water. That night, Kai-san began to write everything down, not using ink or a keyboard, but carving words on stone, carving on rough wooden boards. Each word was a piece of memory, a roar in the middle of a rainy night, a red blood stain on the forest leaves. He wrote from the beginning, from the weak cry of an abandoned child in the middle of the jungle, to the proud eyes of a mother tiger before she collapsed under predator's claws. He told the story to the children, to the villagers, and to strangers who came from far away. He did not force them to believe, but only said that there was once a tiger who raised a human child, and that there was a curse in the forest that was resolved not by a spell, but by the pure love between two creatures of different species. The story spread far and wide, beyond the stream banks, through the Rocky Mountains, to places no one had ever set foot. People passed it on to each other on bright moonlit nights, like an ancient song of the mountains and forests, beautiful yet terrifying, making listeners both want to believe and afraid to believe. Many years later, people still remember Kai-san, the keeper of the soul of Tao-san, as a living symbol of the invisible thread connecting humans and animals. And somewhere amidst the sound of the night forest wind, people sometimes still hear the echoing roar, deep and familiar, mixed with a young whistling sound. Those two sounds echo forever, like the forest reminder that there are bonds that will never fade. The story ends here. Goodbye and see you in the next video.